guys, everybody ready? How we doing? I guess before we start this out, I'd like to say one thing. Have each and every one of you all in this room wish Tom happy birthday? Huh? Okay, happy birthday, Tom. You know, usually when you like to do these reviews and these assessments, you'd like to do them after an 8 games. Unfortunately, the bye week right now, it falls after the 6th game. And the facts are we're 2-4, but nobody in this organization is happy about 2-4. I mean, that's real. But let me remind everybody here, there's a lot of football to be played here. I mean, we have 10 games left in the season. I think the bye week comes at a good time. I think it gives the coaches a chance to review, self-assess, make some corrections, and implement those corrections. It gives the players a chance to regroup and then make that push on the back end of the 10-game schedule. So with that being said, the facts are what? We're 2-1 in the AFC. We're 1-0 in the AFC North, and we're 0-3 in the NFC. The positive here is we have 5 home games. We have 5 divisional games. There's a lot of football to be played here. I know from personal experiences that I've been on teams that, have had worse starts than this. And guess what? They've played really good at the back end of the season. So with that, I'll take your questions.
John, you knew there was going to be growing pains. What stands out, though? What should be maybe further along now after 6 weeks than it is?
I think what we have to do is probably have to be a little bit more consistent. We have to be a little bit more attention to detail. And I think what you do here now, the players now have a chance in these next 4 days to kind of, look themselves in the mirror and just say, okay, what can I do, what I haven't done in the first 6 games to kind of forge this thing and move this thing in a positive direction? Because again, I can reiterate, there's a lot of football left to be played.
What is your theory on why Baker Mayfield isn't as sharp as he was in the last half of last year?
Well, I think I told you all in the spring, to master the quarterback position is very hard. You just can't go up and show up and do it. I mean, there's a lot involved in this. He's in his 2nd year. And right now, defensive coordinators are probably throwing different looks that he hasn't seen. But Baker's one of those guys that, he's smart enough. He's not going to make the same mistake twice. So he's learning from that. But I like where he is. I like his competitiveness. I love everything about him. That hasn't changed for me one bit in terms of his competitiveness, his ability to throw the football and move his thing. What I really like is his teammates like him.
You talked a lot about how you expect, I don't know if it's 20 or 25% jump from a guy, ideally year 1, year 2. Have you seen, where can you point to areas where Baker's improved when most of the numbers show that he hasn't?
Well, what I like is, like, earlier when he was rolling out to his right, and a lot of right-handed quarterbacks will do that early in their age. But what I've liked is now all of a sudden through coaching, through Ryan and through Todd and through Freddie, he's starting to step up within the middle of the pocket, and that's a progression there. I think his balls are still accurate. Everybody keeps saying there's inaccuracy in his ball. I still think he throws a good football.
Given the fact that the expectations of the team, yourself, want to know in the division, very much alive in the AFC playoffs in that regard. Do the coaches need to do a better job of managing the game to get wins rather than worry about developing the offense?
I think Freddie's hired a very talented coaching staff. I think they're exceptional teachers. I think there's really good communication on the game management standpoint that you talk about. I think there's clear communication there.
Have you been unhappy about the way some situations have been managed?
You know what? Right now we're 2-4. We're going to nitpick a little. Everybody's going to nitpick, but right now we're 2-4. We got a lot of football left.
Do you feel like Baker, every single thing that you saw in him when you made him the number 1 overall pick, all the goals and dreams and hopes that you had for him, do you still see all of that in front of him and he's still that guy?
100%.
What are some of those things? What are some of those reasons that make you feel that way?
I like his approach to the game of football. I like the game planning processes of that. I like how he goes out there and competes. I like his grit that he shows. I like how he throws the football. I like how he extends plays. And, again, last I looked, it takes 53 guys to put this thing together. And it's got to be 53 guys playing the game of football.
You made a
clear in the offseason not to buy into the hype, that they have to go out and do it. It's not just about talent. How do you think the team, and even the coaching staff too, has responded to the spotlight being on them, and do you think that that could be a contributing factor to some of the early season struggles?
No, I don't. I think there's got to be a degree of consistency. There's got to be a degree of attention to detail, and I think that's natural. Everybody's going to say that. These guys work really hard. The coaching staff works really hard at preparing these guys, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take attention to those little details moving this thing forward.
Traded Corbett the other day, and I just wonder how you felt, first of all, on the Corbett thing, and then also on the offensive line.
Well, on the offensive line itself, I'll address that, is they have to be a little more consistent in their play, and that's real. With Austin, I'm going to do what's ever in the best interest of this organization, and I thought yesterday was the appropriate time. I want to wish him best, and the new environment will be good for him. But I'm going to do what's best for this organization. And at the time, I thought it was probably the right move right now.
You have something else you could do on the line or whatever to make it better?
Yeah, I mean that's for coming down the road.
Is it linemen that are good enough to start in the middle of the season? Supplies usually limited. Is it particularly limited this year on the?
It's a hard position. You can't have enough of those bigs. I mean, the foundation, I've always said, the foundation for the offense and the defense is very important, and you have to acquire a lot of those pieces. And, it's just a hard position to acquire, especially right about now if you're referring to trades.
John, Freddie said he's had some new experiences. A lot of this is just, first time for him, and he's going to have to learn as he goes a little bit. Overall, how would you assess the job he's done through 6 games?
I think Freddie's done a really good job. I think the team has responded very well. I think the players play hard. What I've liked and as I've observed, he's really good at delegating. He's hired a really good football staff. I like the offensive scheme that he's kind of developed, which was on fold in the Seattle game, by putting 6 in a really good position to kind of move those chains. I think we basically demonstrated our offensive ribbon in that one game as an example. But what I did like is on 4th downs, I like the strategy and the courage that he used in terms of going for it at proper times. And, that's good stuff right there.
A lot of head coaches, call their own plays, but some of them struggle juggling all those responsibilities. And Freddie's told us this is a learning curve for him. He does have some shortcomings that he's working through. How have you seen him juggle the play calling and all the other responsibilities during a game that a head coach has? And has it been too much for him so far?
No, it hasn't been. Freddie was hired for a reason. That was to lead men. And I think in the trust that those men have in Freddie. And then also for his offensive play calling experience. And I think he's actually put together some really nice game plans, and I applaud him for that. I love where he is right now in terms of that first year head coaching label you all try to stick on him. I think he's done a nice job.
As a GM, you're constantly balancing the present and the future. There's a lot that goes into that. Can you just maybe explain your thought process on that when it comes to future cap space, future picks, also trying to make this team as good as it can be next Sunday? How do you process all that together?
That's a fair question. It's a very good question. I think from my position in the seat I sit in, you're always thinking 3 or 4 years down the road. But also in the immediate, are there certain assets that can be acquired in the immediate that also can help this organization? There's different types of valuations on assets in terms of short-term and long-term, and then you have to be able to assess that. But then you also have to be able to assess your roster, the players on your roster, what needs to be fixed on that roster on a year basis and down the year basis. But also the way the cap situation is, you'll be able to have forecasts of money out there at least 3 years down the road.
When you say Freddie's doing a nice job, how do you balance that with 2 and 4, leading, bunch of penalties, bunch of turnovers? There's some sloppiness going on as well.
No, that's a fair question, and slowly but surely these guys are coming together. when I say 10 games are left, that's a lot of football. You know, I've been on 3 different teams and I've been in NFL football for 3 decades. I can remember as a player in like 1984, we wound up 0-7. We started the season at 0-7, but we wound up, I think we wound up somewhere like 7-9 or something like that. And in 1992, I think it was Coach Holmgren's first year on that team. They were 2-5, but they wound up with a winning record. In Kansas City in 2015, I want to say we were about 1-5. Yeah, 1-5, and we wound up going. I'm trying to think what we were. I think we ran 10 straight, and then we eventually made it to the playoffs. But you know, it's the moment now. You have to understand. Everybody within the building has to understand it's one of those moments where you have to reflect, do attention to detail, and move this thing forward with a sense of urgency, and that's what we're going to do.
You mentioned self-scouting and the roster evaluation and stuff like that. Now that you at least have a sample size this year, the 6 games, I'm just kind of curious, do you get the sense maybe there's some more holes that you needed to fill that maybe you didn't think you needed to fill at this point?
There's always holes to be filled. I mean, it's, you know, you can't rebuild this. I mean, right now we're into our 2nd year, and there's always going to be holes that are needed to be filled. Sometimes you try to patch some holes up, other times you try to fortify those positions, and so you have to go about it very systematically.
You say that you can improve the offensive line, but that's coming down the road. Obviously, the trade deadline coming up. When you say down the road, do you mean farther down the road than that, or can you still do something by the trade deadline?
Well, you know, we'll do what's best for the Cleveland Browns organization. We'll do our extensive research. We'll make a million phone calls. And if we think that we can, you know, improve a position, we're going to, regardless of what that position is, we'll go about it if we think it's the right fit for the Cleveland Browns.
Was it a mistake to not retain Ken Zampese?
How so?
Well, it seemed like when he was here, things were really going well with Baker. And I'm not saying anything about Ryan Lindley or anybody else. I'm just saying that it seemed like he might have been a big part of his success last year. So I'm asking you, was it a mistake to not retain him?
I think that Todd Monken, Ryan Lindley, and Freddie Kitchens are very good at that quarterback position. And I think we're very lucky to have those 3 guys helping assist and teach and grow number 6.
Before the season, you talked a lot about how you put this town together, but it has to become a team, and that's what you look forward to in training camp. Freddie mentioned it the other day. Do you think this team has come together like it needs to? And if not, what needs to happen for that to happen?
You know, I said as training camp was beginning to, you know, come to the closing days, that the one thing I noticed, this group, they genuinely like being around each other. And that's a sign of a locker room getting close. And I also made a statement, at adverse moments, you'll find out what your team is all about. So right now, you have, you know, the players have 4 days, and they're going to sit there and they're going to think about a lot of things and assess, you know, what can I do? You know, what can I do to help this thing move forward? I thought Freddie's message to the team the last 2 days has been excellent about moving this thing forward, about looking yourself in the mirror. And it's always good sometimes to look yourself in the mirror and say, what can I do to make myself better and the Cleveland Browns better?
How would you evaluate that Odell has done for you guys so far?
I think Odell is one of the finest receivers I've ever been around, and I've been around the Hall of Fame receiver too. And I think that's James Lofton. I think James is a hell of a football player. Very rarely do you get to acquire a player like this. An example would be, how many guys can make a catch he made in the New York Jets game? Or even if you go to Seattle game, how many guys can make a catch that he made on the Seattle Seahawks sideline? Not very many guys can do that. But what people don't see or maybe understand is, you know, defensive coordinators now are trying to take away Odell, which that frees up the backside of other receivers. So that just goes to show you that, you know, Odell's one of those guys who's a selfless individual in terms of on the field. And another thing that you don't see is his run blocking ability. I think he really does a nice job on the run blocking part of it. I'm happy we have him, and I think he's a really good football player.
Specifically on that 2015 Kansas City team, I'm double checking. You were 1-5 and you won your last 10.
Yes, sir.
So you go 1-5 to 11-5. As a reference point for
this team then, what happened? Did you get healthy? Did the schedule get easier? Did guys just play better? What can you learn specifically from that?
I think it was a combination of things. I think I thought the coaching staff, which our coaching staff is doing now, is doing some self-assessments, understanding, maybe fix and tweak things here and make some corrections there. But also took those men in that locker room, and they had a chance to self-reflect, and understand, okay, I got to do a better job on my part. And I think this team will do that. I mean, they have 4 days now to really self-reflect and say, okay, we got 10 games left in this thing. It's all in front of us in terms of our goals. I mean, our goal is to win the AFC North. We've said that. And now we have 5 home games and 5 divisional games. Let's go for it.
What's your outlook on Denzel Ward? And obviously, the injuries have been piling up early in his career, and is that a concern?
No, not at all. National Football League's a hard business, and injuries, accumulate on all teams. I'm happy, he's back and he's been practicing, so I'm excited to see him move forward.
John, why do you think all the penalties? I mean, because you are number 1 in penalties.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's fact too. But at the end of the day, again, it's one of those things you have to clean up, and this is the proper time to clean those things up.
I don't recall, I know it's a different year, but even any of the same players from last year, I don't remember, especially the second half of the year, penalties being that much of an issue at all.
Yeah, I mean, my only advice is, again, it's that attention to details and the little things, and don't put yourself in that position if you're going to get those penalties. And so right now, I'm sure we're doing a self-assessment of that and just trying to get a basic understanding of why this is occurring.
How realistic is it, though, to cut down on those penalties when when you start getting deeper into the season and they're there? How realistic, though, is it that they can be cut down as opposed to already become a habit?
I think it's realistic that you can cut them down. Again, that's what happens when you establish and have good coaches, and they can reinforce that on a daily basis, and they will begin to, do the emphasis there. That's going to happen.
No, every loss is just one loss, but does the magnitude of those 2 losses concern you? 2 of the biggest losses in the last 6 years, point-wise. Does that bother you at all?
It's a National Football League. There are 16 games in the season, and those things are going to happen.
Go ahead, Nick.
What did you think about Jarvis kind of came out last week and stated, pretty strongly that he believes that you guys need to intentionally, deliberately try to get the ball to Odell more and also to Jarvis more. Your thoughts on him saying
Well, I
that?
think it all depends on the team you're beginning to play. I mean, you have to first understand your opponent, create an offensive game plan to maximize your offensive output. I mean, it's total team football. Is he a talented player? Yeah, he's a talented football player. If we can get the ball to him, we get the ball to him. But let's don't force it. Let's win the game. That's the objective.
John, you can make a strong argument that Nick Chubb has been your most valuable player to this point. You talked about Freddie's striking a balance with the offense. Are you guys running the ball enough, and are you running it in spots where you need to run it, especially inside the red zone?
I think Nick Chubb, I think he embolizes everything about being a professional football player. I think he is a tireless worker. I think he's a talented football player. There's times to give him the ball, and there's times not to give him the ball, and I think that's from a game planning situation. Do I think he is a really good football player? Yes, I do.
Are you satisfied he's getting enough touches?
I am.
Is Greg Robinson playing as well now as he did in the second half of last season?
I would like Greg to be more consistent.
And in what specifically?
Just be more consistent, as a football player.
What has concerned you the most so far this year, and how do you think that could be addressed?
Again, I think what you have to do is you have to do some. You have this whole week here, and the coaches are doing a nice job of kind of doing self-assessment, understanding the last 6 games, what can be corrected, what can be implemented.
Hard on that.
At the end of the day, I think it's the point that you brought up. Let's minimize the penalties here.
Two big pieces along that front four on defense. Has it been as dominant as you would have hoped, especially coming off 275 against the Niners and whatever 170 rushing against Seattle?
No, I think those guys are good football players. That may have been a unique and isolated instance. I like the players who we acquired, and I think what they've done and the leadership they've kind of given to that defensive line is really good. I think that, like Olivier Vernon, who you were probably referring to, I thought he played his best game against the Seattle Seahawks and did a nice job.
What's your evaluation of Chris Hubbard so far this season?
Again, I think Chris, I like Chris as a person. Again, I would challenge him to be a little bit more consistent.
My question then is, if you're saying both with Robinson and Hubbard, you'd like them to be more consistent. What effect do you think it has on Baker Mayfield when his two tackles aren't playing consistent enough? Do you think that seeps into a quarterback at all if he's not sure about his protection?
Well, I mean, you can imply that, but if you start the season, if you remember, all of a sudden Greg gets removed from a game, and then all of a sudden you have to rotate the tackles, and all of a sudden another tackle gets hurt, and then you have to play rotating tackles again. So there's got to be a cohesiveness of those five guys on a consistent basis, and they haven't been in unity here together and being able to operate as one. And that's what you want your offensive line to do on a week-to-week basis, is be together with five guys working together.
Four of those five guys are the same guys who played together in the second half of last season when you guys protected Baker so well. I think that's been a little bit of the confusing part, is that we've seen this line, for the most part, protect Baker, and now there are times when it looks like Baker is not as comfortable in the pocket.
Well, I mean, that's again, that's you have to be more consistent. It's not one isolated player or one isolated incident. It's a few things all just happening at random times that kind of reflect the question that you had just asked.
You keep saying that there's a lot of football left, and there is. It's hard to win games when your quarterback leads the NFL in interceptions. How much of that is on Baker? How much is it on the coaching staff? And then how much is it on his supporting cast on the field?
I think, again, it takes, on offense, it takes 11 guys to drive this thing forward. So everybody's got to be single-minded and working at their respective positions. On a week to week in a game or in a play to play basis. I'm not going to single out any one particular thing, but we do need to improve certain things.
You were talking about Freddie last year, and even when you hired him, you talked about play calling being an art, and that was something you were drawn to from him. Are you seeing that same type of play caller you saw in the last 8 games?
I did. I thought it was on display last week. I thought the offense found their rhythm. I thought Six found his rhythm. I really liked the game plan that those guys had established, and I think Freddie does a really nice job with the play calling.
It's a little odd that it sort of showed up in Game 6, but kind of wasn't there for most of the first 5 games.
No, I mean there's different game plans for different defenses, and it just so.
Flow that you mentioned, because that was always a thing with Baker when he's cooking. You could just, even in the stands or press box, you could feel it.
But actually, I thought last week the rhythm was there, and you could, the offense could move at any time during that game, and it, it's started being together as a unit here.
Talk about Antonio Callaway's up and down season and what he's been through, for you this year, what your expectations are for him as he goes forward, and then also, let me squeeze in also, the outlook on Kareem Hunt coming back soon, and do you have any contact with him?
Well, as I look at Antonio, 2 years ago he hadn't played any football. But last year that was his first year after missing the season. Then he gets a little slow start because he's got the 4-game suspension. He's got to work himself back into the rhythm of the offense, and he is slowly, working back into the rhythm of the offense. And I expect him to kind of pick up where he had left off last year and kind of use that vertical speed that he does. Now, with regards to Kareem, it's my understanding that he's doing really well. I think he's ahead of schedule in terms of his rehabilitation, and in a couple weeks here, he's going to be back, and I can't wait to see him.
Can you, this is the bye week, the trade deadline is in for 2 weeks. Is it safe to say you'd like to accomplish something this week with this bye week? If you're going to do it, that will affect the lineup?
Well, what I'd like to do is constantly work the phones and do some research, and whatever happens, happens. If nothing happens, you move on and go to the next project.
Nothing happens. You did trade for 2 offensive linemen right before the start of the season. Do you think that there's an in-house lineup change that could give you better offensive line play that you can go to?
Well, I think, again, once we get doing our self-evaluation and our assessments, I mean, we'll come to some conclusions and determine which way we're going to head.
Quick follow-up on Callaway, just from a, from an off-the-field standpoint. I mean, what are your expectations for him there? I'm sure it was a blow to you and the organization that he had to be suspended for the first 4 games, but how do you feel like he's doing in terms of, whatever he needs to do to stay on the football field?
I want him to grow every day. He's with, I want him to grow and mature. That's what you look for, and that's all you want to see is growth.
Seen that to this
I have
point?
so far, yes.
Overall roster building question here. Since you've been here, you drafted a quarterback #1, you brought in 2 big-time receivers here, you added 2 big-time defensive linemen this offseason, you've drafted cornerbacks very high. You have to prioritize things as a GM, right? You can't fill every position immediately all the time. Just on your list of priorities, was offensive line lower on the list of priorities compared to what you did at corner, what you did at receiver, what you did on defensive line as you built this team?
I've made a statement about a year ago, and I still believe that to my core beliefs, that I think the foundation of both the offense and the defensive side of the ball is really important, and I will always stick to that. And that's those 2 different lines, the offense and the defensive line.
Bruce Allen lately?
We've had a few conversations. Is there anything you want me to pass on to him?
John, you've made moves this offseason. You brought in, to bring in Beckham and Richardson and Vernon and guys like that. When you've brought in high-priced veterans like that, does that make it more difficult to maybe try to go get another guy like that who's going to cost some money when you've already made some moves, or do you still have the flexibility you need?
I think we still have flexibility to do a lot of different things.